says a simple mind. I think probably because at various times in my life I've been called simple-minded. Probably quite often. You know, Gil's kind of simple-minded. And I don't think, it took me a long time to realize that perhaps people were not trying to be complimentary when they said that. I think it's supposed to be an insult, but I thought about it, and I realized that I kind of like the notion of having a simple mind, a mind that works simply. And I don't think that things need to be unnecessarily complicated. Look for the simplest answer that actually addresses all the parts of the problem, and that's likely to be the right answer. That's a good way to live your life. Look for the simple answers to the problems. And I think that we in the DIR community sometimes suffer because we are somewhat simple. And people believe, after all, you know, we think that you should address a developmental disorder from a developmental perspective, and a lot of times that just boils down to treating the kids like kids, which for me means basically playing with them and having a good time and getting down on the floor and being joyful. And I think people generally think that maybe that's not science, right? That's not rigorous enough. And people will even say, oh, you know, floor time, you get down on the floor. That's not science, that's just playing with kids. And things have to be complicated, I think people think, in order for them to be scientific. And I hate to say it, I have a prejudice that makes me believe that sometimes practitioners working with kids on the spectrum deliberately make things complicated, and deliberately make them convoluted, and deliberately make them hard to follow, and deliberately make them sort of heavy in paper and pseudo-data, because they want parents and lawmakers to say, oh, that's really complicated. I don't really understand it very well, but it must be scientific, and I can't really do it, but you look like you know how to do it, so I'm going to let you do it. And I think sometimes that sort of passes for real rigorous work with kids, and I think we in the DIR community sort of suffer from that. But hard science, and that is to say things like theoretical physics, has a concept of elegance. Do you know what the concept of elegance is in hard science? A theory should be simple, and should be beautiful, and should be able to answer your question in the simplest possible way. And that theories that are complicated, convoluted, difficult to follow, lots of different parts, lots of exceptions, are not elegant. And scientists work really hard to get rid of those theories when they can, and shrink them down, shrink them down, shrink them down, and make them more elegant. So if a theory is ugly, then hard scientists tend to reject it. So we in the soft sciences, and that is to say all of the social sciences are soft sciences. You walk across the MIT campus and you ask anybody, do you think a psychologist is a scientist? They'll laugh out loud. Do you think a social scientist is a scientist? They'll laugh out loud, because they're hard scientists. So those of us in the soft sciences need to take a tip from the hard scientists and consider our simplicity a virtue. Convoluted is not necessarily better. So I'm kind of content with thinking simply. And I am content doing simple and appropriate developmental work. So let me tell you a little story. I want to talk now about symbolism and how we can be more symbolic here with almost no effort, even with the kids who don't look to you like they're ready to be symbolic. So I'm going to tell you the story about my daughter's school. I'm going to tell two stories about my daughter's school. The first one is about her eurythmy shoes. Do you know what eurythmics are? Eurythmics are this dance, movement, singing combination that they do at my daughter's school. And it's very specific, and the kids have fun, and they're up and moving and talking at the same time. This is what Stanley might have suggested to you if you were going to do cerebellum work. He would want, at one point in one of our, and I see Tony's nodding, I see Ray's nodding. At one point he said, put the kid on the ball and have him do math equations and bounce them up and down because this is important work. But it's the same work, right? So before they do eurythmy, they begin in the fall. They go outside, they pick the marigolds that are in the garden. They take the marigolds, they boil them in some solution, they turn it into a golden dye. They take these little white ballet shoes, they take the ballet shoes and they dye them. The kids all participate in this, all steps of it. The kids take the ballet shoes and dye them in the golden dye. And then they take them and they dry them, and those are their eurythmy shoes. And the teacher the whole time is telling them the story about how the sun, makes the marigolds. The marigolds have caught some of the sun's rays, that they're putting the golden sun's rays into their shoes, so that every time for the rest of the winter, whenever they put on their eurythmy shoes, they're taking the sun and they're putting them on their feet, right? The teacher never says, this stands for that. Right? Never says, I am telling you that symbolically we are taking the sun. She's just telling you the sun did this. She's teaching symbolism in a very, very subtle and sort of pervasive way, as if I don't really care whether you are at functional, emotional, developmental level 5 or not and are capable of understanding symbolism. I'm just going to tell you something symbolic. And then I'm going to let you wonder about it all year long, whenever you put your shoes on, whenever you get ready to get up and move. I'm going to let you think about where these came from. So this is, as Stanley might have said, encouraging the spirit of inquiry in a kid. Like, this is maybe too far for you to go right now, but I'm going to suggest that you can do it anyways. I know you can. So that's one little example. Now, that's right in the middle of early childhood education, and all of you good early childhood educators are doing this already, right? Very often a classroom for early childhood kids will have a bulletin board theme about spring, and the classroom will talk about spring, and then we'll do all of the things that are related to spring. We'll talk about birth and beginnings and rebirth, and we'll tell the story of Persephone, and we'll tie that all together. So this is fairly typical early childhood curriculum, right? All I am suggesting is when you're doing that, what you're actually doing is what we were talking about earlier. You're actually moving from functional, emotional, developmental level 4-ish to functional, emotional, developmental level 5-ish. So there are really simple ways to be symbolic.